Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good evening. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee. I'll be with you for the next hour here on Radio Hamra. Let's get right into it. So our hearts, our minds still on the people of Iran. Um, News lately, I've mentioned this before, I'm not a journalist and don't want to pretend to be, but the latest news I've heard is just there have been talks between Iran and the US that I don't know where it's getting to now. And this has made some people less hopeful because it seems like they're going the negotiation route with this regime, so reform rather than regime change, which is what most people want and the people want. Obviously, the regime doesn't want that. So, but things can definitely change, which I'm going to talk about a bit today. February 14th, this coming Saturday, is a global call or day of action or call of action for people all around the world. But specifically, I've seen Los Angeles, Munich, and Toronto, I believe. But to be honest, I've also seen people posting in other cities as well. So likely almost wherever you are, there's some protests close to you that you can attend, and I hope you will, to do what you can to support the people of Iran. There at times isn't so much that we can do, but that's definitely one of the very active ways we can do something is showing up to protests. That the bigger those are, it keeps the public eye and it grabs media attention and social media attention, and that can have some impact, even though it might seem small and it's small compared to what the people of Iran are doing. But all we can do is all we can do. So I hope you will be there wherever that is. In Los Angeles, it's in downtown LA. Hope to see you there. As I was mentioning, the news coming out, and I know people listen to the show live, and many people might listen on podcasts or replays. And by that time, it's whatever I'm saying now might have changed. And that's one thing. But the other thing is just keeping in mind that things change a lot, and we often, might get excited or you might get down and feel lots of things. As things change or as new news comes out. But as much as we care about what's happening, and that makes us feel a lot and might make us go up and down emotionally, which is understandable, I do think it's important to keep in mind that we're looking at bigger picture and long term. I don't mean that I don't want change to happen soon, but what I mean is that things can change a lot. You hear something that this is what's happening, or this is the latest development, and then people jump to some conclusion, and then things change. So, when it comes to the U.S. involvement, it went from no involvement to, if any protesters get shot, there will be involvement, to, that's not happening because they stopped executions, to, U.S. forces are arriving and ready around Iran, to negotiations, to who knows what. So we don't exactly know. And so I don't say this to not care or not to follow it and, not be involved, but to keep in mind we have to show our support for the long haul, which means we don't know how long it will be, and we don't know how many more ups and downs there will be. So I think it's important to try to keep that in mind, that you will get some good news and it might make you hopeful, and then you might get some not so good news or bad news that might make us down. And even what is good news or bad news is not always so clear. So first and foremost, let's keep that in mind, that we have to maintain our support, which means there will be ups and downs, rumors, news, new news, turns out something wasn't true, all those kinds of things. But the other thing I was thinking about, we don't always know what's good news or bad news. Of course, some things are more black and white. We see the tragic deaths of many of the people of Iran. That is just bad and sad news. And I mentioned on recent shows, there's no reason to sugarcoat it. And really, I don't think it's benefiting or honoring those who have died to try to make it positive in some way. We don't want it to be in vain. So we hope that the people of Iran can achieve the freedom that they want and deserve. but we don't need to sugarcoat any single death as somehow okay in any type of way. It's always a tragedy when we hear that news. So that type of news is black and white as far as that's just bad, very, very sad and tragic. I'm talking more about, we hear about geopolitical things, the US getting involved or not getting involved or negotiating and all those things. One, it's hard to know most of the time. Sometimes there will be more black and white, but if it's even good or bad in the moment. But the bigger thing is for most types of news, and even news that might seem more clear in the moment, the bigger picture can change lots of things. So the US being involved or how they're involved, it's hard to know how that would play out. I do think it's likely that that would be needed. And most importantly, as always, we want to just amplify the voices of the people in Iran, which isn't just one single voice that all wants the same thing, of course, but you do hear calls for US intervention because they see that it is hard for them, unarmed civilians and citizens, to go against armed, barbaric government who's willing to use any and all forces and outside forces to even kill its own people at whatever age, whatever cost, whatever it might be. So it does seem like they're saying they want support, but again, I can't say I'm speaking on behalf of all of them. I'm just hearing saying things that I have heard. But I do think it's important for us to just be aware of this tendency to jump to conclusions. This is good. This is bad. This is what's going to happen. People. I think the news cycle, the 24-hour news, and then social media being 24 hours a day, they want to speculate on everything. So one statement is made, and then there's 10 hours of speculation about one statement and what this means and what it can mean and what's going to happen, and then bring in this expert and they give their opinion and all that stuff. And so I understand the interest and trying to gather information, but we can only know so much when some things happen, and we don't want to fall victim to the fact that because the news stations have to fill up all the time, or social media, people feel like they have to have a strong opinion, a hot take on every single thing that happens, that we have to listen to all of them or think that they mean very much, or that someone knows what is going to happen. So we have experts in every field, and in the field of Iran and public or political science and other things like that. Of course, there's going to be people who have more education and experience for sure, but no one knows how something like this is going to play out completely. No one can say this is exactly what's going to happen, or if this happened, this is exactly what would happen after the fact. We are all looking for that, so we turn to people who we think know more than us, which in general is a good thing. We should be doing that when we are trying to learn about a subject or whatever the topic is, and we know we're not experts in that field or area or as informed as certain people. It is good for us to turn to the experts and people who know more to see what we can learn from them. So, when it comes to Iran and what's going on, no matter how informed you are, there's people that are studying this for their whole life, or that have more inside information or are closer to things that we can all learn from. And that's good. We should turn to experts. We should turn to people who are knowledgeable and try to learn from them to better understand what's happening. The problem now, it's a good and a bad thing, is that anyone can say their opinion, and it could be out there. So it's good and bad. It's that anyone could say their opinion, and also that anyone could say their opinion. So it's good that it's more democratic in some ways, that anyone can put their voice out there and people can hear it. And social media has created that type of avenue. But the not so good thing is that anyone could be a self-proclaimed expert in any field and say whatever they want to say. And it sometimes does gain influence and attention, even if it's not useful, beneficial, accurate. Any of those kinds of things don't really matter. It's just whoever is the most interesting, or gathers the most interest, or presents the most provocative ideas, or has the nicest marketing or packaging of their videos and things. All those things impact who becomes the most popular online, even though those people aren't, again, necessarily knowledgeable, being careful about what they say, that what they say they really do know, or they don't say more than they know, or say things with more certainty than what they actually know, that it's useful or beneficial, any of those things. And so we have to be aware that we're exposed to a lot of these types of people that, you go to their page and they have, a few million or hundreds of thousands of followers. And that then, makes us think they're credible. There's a credibility that we see with the number of followers. I mean, we're all prone to that. If I see someone speaking on an issue and I go on their page and they have like 500 followers, I have a different feeling than if they have 500,000 followers. That's just the reality. Sometimes with academics, they generally don't have a lot of followers, even if they're experts in their fields, just because that's how it usually is, because most scholarship, most experts, professors, people who are studying a subject, they don't make their ideas presented in a super exciting way. Because of some of the issues that I'll also likely talk about today, but they don't make it seem as exciting because they do say things that they know in the ways that they know it, and they don't exaggerate or try to do those things. And that usually is less interesting and exciting than someone who says things in a provocative way, who makes things more dramatic than they are, says they know things more than they do, all of that stuff. So sometimes I will go to, an academics page and they will have very few followers because they're not, social media experts, and they're not also presenting things in ways that gather a lot of attention online. So we have to be careful who we're listening to. I just see so many quote unquote experts out there who don't have anything but a very loud mouth and lots of opinions, and they just say it. And, no matter what the situation is, they're going to give a really strong opinion about it, and, say they know, or call out someone, or, whatever it might be, just because they know those are the kind of things that get attention and get engagement and likes and shares and even hate watches. And maybe it's going to make some people angry and outraged, and they're going to share it to be like, look what this idiot is saying. Other people will agree with it. So we have to be careful about the information that we consume. In recent shows, I've also talked about, being aware of how much of the graphic images and the overly emotional images we see. We definitely don't want to ignore the pains of the people of Iran. So pay attention to it. So I'm not saying don't look at them. I'm thinking more of people when they say they'll watch, hours and hours of incredibly painful things to watch, whether they're very graphic, because sadly we've seen a lot of those images of the people of Iran who have been hurt or killed by the regime, the emotionally intense, the responses of family members. We've all seen those very painful, parents finding their child's body or at their child's funeral, just devastatingly heartbreaking images and videos. And we should see them and share them so that the world knows what's going on in Iran and feels the pain and knows the pain of the people of Iran. So I'm definitely not suggesting that. It's not black or white, but being mindful of how much we're consuming of those types of things, because they will impact us. We can only take so much. And by seeing them over and over again, there starts to be this feeling like I can't turn away because I care about the people of Iran, but you don't help anyone by watching the same video over and over again. That doesn't help anyone, just by almost hurting yourself in some way. So we have to be aware of that type of material that we consume, but also the opinions, because one of the reasons why people in social media can get so big is by being very certain about things. That I know the truth, I know exactly what's going to happen, I have the expertise, the knowledge that other people don't have. I have the knowledge that experts don't have, which is, again, this problem that anyone can say anything, is that anyone could pretend like they're anything and say that they are, the topmost or the expert in whatever field, even if they don't have that knowledge or experience, and then even share that they have insights other people don't have. But we all have to deal with this human experience of uncertainty, that there's no guarantee what is going to happen to us, so about the future and what things will come from the current life in the future, or how things will go to that afterlife after we die. There's no certainty or absolute guarantees of what's the right thing to do morally, as a parent, as a person, all sorts of things. There's so much uncertainty. And so when we care about something, we have an even harder time dealing with uncertainty related to that thing, which makes sense. If you're your child is going into an operation or dealing with some health issue, you care so much, and so you really want to know, if you could somehow, what's the best treatment, what's going to happen if my child goes through this treatment, because you care so much. You don't want uncertainty, you want certainty, even if it's not real. And so with what's happening in Iran, we are obviously very worried. We care so much. We're seeing people dying and people suffering in such horrible ways that we want it all to end. And we also want to know what's going to happen, what should happen, all of those kinds of things. So it makes sense to want that type of certainty and to want to know. But I do think you have to accept that no one knows for sure. No one can have all the answers. And so if someone claims they know, it's not because they do and they have some access to some knowledge and information that others don't. It's because they know it's going to get attention. It's going to give them potential popularity and views and shares and likes and follows and all those kinds of things that they're looking for online. And we just have to be aware that although we are drawn to those things because it feels good in all times, but especially in times when we're more worried or concerned and care even more, that no one can have those answers. So just being aware of what we look at, what we share. I think it's important to look at what experts are saying and try to understand their knowledge the best that we can. But be careful. I'm not saying people who just share their opinions, and if they're not a professor, we shouldn't listen to them. That's definitely not true. There's a lot of people that have good insights that aren't the traditional types of experts. I'm not saying don't look at them at all, but be as mindful of who we're listening to, because even an academic can overstate or try to get too much attention by saying more than what they actually know or being more certain than they actually can be. And so we want to be careful, one, not to jump to conclusions about what's going to happen, even though we might think we know if something is good or bad news, being a bit more patient in that way. And then also being very mindful of what we consume and recognize there's a lot of so-called experts out there that want to tell us they know exactly what's going to happen next or how things have to go, but no one can have that kind of knowledge or certainty about these types of things. All right, let's go to our first commercial break. We'll be right back. Back. The first segment I talked about not being so certain about the news, if it's good or bad. Of course, sometimes clearly there's some tragedies that are bad that we don't want to try to sugarcoat. But in general, we hear, things are happening in this direction or that direction. One, we don't know how true they are because, sometimes there's rumors or things are still developing, but also it's hard to know the bigger picture of how things are going to go. And then also being mindful of what we consume as far as information, that people want to sell us certainty because we're all yearning for it, and people know that, and it gets attention because it comforts us. It makes us feel good to think we found someone who knows the truth when we're so unsure, but no one has this kind of absolute truth about things and has that kind of certainty. And in this segment, I want to talk about a type of psychological experience we all have as human beings because of this inherent uncertainty about outcomes and also uncertainty about even what's exactly the right thing to do, because those things don't exist. And because of that, we have to learn to live with this uncertainty. We try to look for ways to get rid of it, whether that's turning to some experts, even religion can do that, or some ideology. Okay, I believe this and I can always believe this because this is the right way. And so it's always the right way. And we see this in people who are very ideological. And because of that, they become so ideological, they become inflexible, that they have a certain rule that, for example, I'm a pacifist, which could be a good thing, that I'm against war, I'm against, aggression and violence. But then even when it might be defending themselves or someone's life, they might get so attached to this idea and this ideology of being a pacifist that they don't take the right action, which is to save someone's life or save their own life, for that matter. And so ideologies are also things that we cling to for that comfort of, I found the truth, and because of that, I don't have to think anymore. It's kind of like we think to get to the ideology, and then now I'm done. I don't have to think. Because that's always the harder thing, to have to keep thinking about things. It's a lot easier to just think we know and move on. Sometimes I'll work with parents and they're like, okay, my kid wants to go out or says they want to do this. Should I always say no or always say yes? Kind of like they want that kind of an answer. So because I get it. It's a lot easier to be like, you just say no every time or you say yes every time, rather than it's more complicated than that. And there might be some, general guiding principles and values, but then you have to also look at each case individually. You can't just assume that you have some kind of truth and then that's it. You don't have to think anymore. You make a bedtime with your kids. It can be good to follow that bedtime, but of course, something that can happen that you have to be flexible. All of a sudden, their grandma surprises you, comes home and it's closer to their bedtime. You say, no, you have to go to bed anyway. You say, okay, no, maybe push it this time. Or your kid is asleep, or it's a holiday, or whatever. There's different things. It's good to have rules and those kinds of guidelines where we can also fall victim of being too attached to those things. So that's something that we do. I was talking about just kind of these rules in daily life, but ideologically, we can do the same kind of thing where we just get attached to something because it's so much easier to put all of our uncertainty into some ideology and not have to think anymore. And so same thing as I was saying with like parenting or other things as well, we would like to have this comfort of certainty, but we have to accept that the human experience involves uncertainty. Uncertainty of the present, what we should do, uncertainty about the future and what's going to happen, uncertainty of how things will play out if you do a certain thing. There's no such thing as absolute certainty. Now, this is a very unsettling feeling. There isn't this clean resolution. The clean resolution is to try to have certainty. Another thing people will do is they maybe don't even turn to others. They'll just think they have all the answers. That's way more comforting to think, I know that I have the truth, or I know that I'm right about this. And I actually think this is a part of, I was going to say big reason, probably actually big reason. There's many things that contribute to things like this, but part of why we have so much polarization, it's one of the factors of polarization, is that because we are all actually a little bit uncertain. We're all actually a little bit uncertain about what we think and believe and the ideas we have, the political beliefs that we have. But that's very unsettling to be uncertain about something that's so important. And so because of that, and because we don't want to feel that way, we take that uncertainty, we put it completely on the other side of the issue, on the people on the other side of the issue. So I'm totally sure. And I'm totally sure that I'm right. And that's why you're so stupid to believe anything other than what I believe. To me, there's this clear sense of, call it projection, or I don't think reaction formation would fit, but the term to me it matters, but it's less important to me like what's actually happening, which is because I don't feel good that I know I can't know the truth and I believe something, I'd rather take that and put that all on you and go to some other place where I overcompensate and feel like I'm totally certain about my beliefs and what I believe, what I think, and all of those kinds of things. Because the truth is we can't know for sure. And so where does this leave us? Because, even not believing something or not, seeing one side or the other side of the issue, that's also a choice. Because you might think, well, because we can't know for sure because of this uncertainty, then nobody should think or believe anything. I think it does encourage us to be more humble and open-minded and not so fixed in what we believe. But that also doesn't work because, we're not just talking about ideas in an abstract way. We're talking about ideas that relate to actions that take place. Should we, tax people this much or that much? Or how do we, do taxing? How do we pay for this or that? Who will be in power? So yeah, there's uncertainty. You can't be totally sure, 100% sure one candidate is better than the other. But you have to vote because not voting is also making a decision. You're choosing to act in that way. And there's uncertainty that that's the best thing to do. So we're always stuck in this place as humans that we have uncertainty, and everything in life has this uncertainty, but we still have to take actions with some level of certainty because we have to do something. So, I was saying some example of a treatment. Let's say it's even for yourself. There's two medical treatments for some illness that you have. And the doctor, and let's say you can get a second opinion, you get all the information that, here are the pros and cons of this one, here are the risks and the benefits of this one and that one. And you hear the two treatments and, you try to come to some decision. Now, you might fool yourself by saying, oh, I know 100% this is the right choice. And yeah, of course, sometimes things are more black and white. I don't want to say it's never the case, but often, even if it's not black and white and it's very gray, that which one is the better choice, the more aggressive one, the more experimental one, whatever it is, there's different choices that you have. You have to make a decision because each day you don't start a treatment, the illness is affecting you and could be getting worse or could be growing or whatever it might be. So, not choosing either of them might seem like I'm recognizing the uncertainty, but it's not because that is also a choice. To not choose either treatment, to have no treatment is a choice. So, you have to pick one of those, even though you are not 100% sure and certain that it's the right one. But then once you pick one of them, you have to 100% commit to that one, even if you're not 100% certain. And that can feel off. How am I 100% committing to something that I'm not 100% sure about? Now, sometimes there's things where you don't have to make an ultimate choice, or sometimes there's things where we can switch things easily. Oh, I was going to plan a trip to this city, and the week before I realized I want to change my mind, and I could cancel everything, and I'm going to plan, a trip to the other city. So we didn't have to 100% commit altogether. We could change our mind. But let's say this example of a treatment that involves, let's say surgeries and medicines and all these kinds of things. Let's say it's more extensive. It's not something that you can do option A one day, option B the next day, and switch back and forth. So once you make a choice, even though it's not a 100% certain choice, you have to act on it or commit to it 100%. So, okay, I'm doing treatment A. Now, sometimes we try to fool ourselves into comfort by saying this was definitely the right one. There's no way this was the wrong option. And sometimes we might get evidence that's either supporting that or against that. But we have a tendency to want to get rid of that uncertainty that what if I made the wrong decision, or how could I have made a decision when I wasn't sure, by fooling ourselves into thinking this was 100% the right decision. But the truth is, you still don't know that if you did option B, what was going to happen at this point. You can't know for sure, especially for you individually, one individual, rather than, let's say, a body of research looking at thousands of patients. We don't know for sure what would have happened if you did this one. Would you feel better, worse? Would you even be dead by now? Would you be doing better by now? It's hard to know. But once you're in it, you have to accept that this is where I am now. I chose this path. I made the best decision I could in an uncertain moment. I picked the one that I thought was the better option. And now I'm committing to it 100% because for either of them to work, I have to 100% commit to them, even though I'm not 100% certain about it. So this challenge of dealing with the uncertainty of life, to me, is one of the biggest challenges we face as human beings. And I was talking about some kind of, let's say, treatment, but let's say you're a parent. There's no one way of parenting that works for every child. Already Keon turns 9 months tomorrow. I can't believe it. I've gotten this pleasure of being his dad now for 9 months, which is like the greatest joy of my life. And already we've had to make, I don't know how to put into numbers, but hundreds probably of different types of decisions, thousands of real decisions, but like hundreds of times, like, okay, do you do it this way or that way? Do we, even today we're buying diapers and it's like this one or that one. And I'm looking online and, trying to find which one. And I don't know for sure which one's going to be the best one, but you just do your research and then, you go forward. And it would be so nice. I really do wish there was some way to know exactly what to do every time, that someone had 100% certainty that if you do this, this, and this with Keon, it's going to be the best for him. And I can guarantee that 100%. I would love that. I just would be so thankful for that. And, would pay for that, would give my whatever it is, time, attention, money to get that. Whatever I could give to get it, I would, because it's so important to me. But the reality is it doesn't exist. I could look at research, I could talk to experts, we could even see doctors, all of those things that you definitely should do, but not because it's going to get to me to 100% certainty. It's just going to give me the best chance of giving him the best chance of doing the best for him. But it is a tough thing to deal with, knowing that it's uncertain. And people have a hard time sitting with that anxiety that comes with that uncertainty, which to me is something that we have to learn as human beings to live with, to sit with. that we can only do our best, not knowing for sure what is right, not knowing for sure that this is the best way, but we have to make our best choice and then go with that 100%. So I choose something for Keon and we do that. Yes, you try it a few times, it doesn't work. Some things like the diapers or something else, you can change them, get another one. Some things are harder to change or shift very quickly, and you have to commit for a while to something. But we have to be careful not to fall victim to the ways that we try to get away from uncertainty, which can be ideologies, which could be convincing ourselves we have the answers, or it could be, as I've talked about, turning to someone else who tells us they have all the answers and then blindly following them, feeling like once we found the truth, we don't have to think anymore. As I always say, no one could do the thinking for you. You always have to still, at the end of the day, make your decision, your thoughts, your ideas based on whatever you can know, whatever you can gather, and then making that best decision. And it just came to my mind because I'm not going to get into the details, but some names coming out in the Epstein files that you'll see include some influential people, whether it's in the health or self-help kind of world, and some people are shocked. And for me, it hasn't been that shocking because I think you see this a lot with people who become gurus or self-help influencers, or get big in that kind of world, or spiritual gurus and healers and people that become very famous or well known. But we see lots of abuses of power and abuses of people because and sometimes you can say, well, was it the fame that made them that way, or did they have something that made them think they should be famous and went that way, and then these things happen? I'm sure there's some of both. I think often there are people who think they have some superiority that makes them have all the answers, and they start to share that. And then because of that, especially when they get the fame that opens up opportunities, they take advantage of it and take advantage of people to get whatever they want, and use people and abuse people at times to get that. And they might even feel justified or feel like it's okay, or feel like because they're superior, it's not a bad thing, or they want it, or all these kinds of things. But we see these types of abuses time and time again. Almost every time there is some kind of guru or spiritual leader that becomes very, very big and mainstream and well known, we see abuses of power. I'm not trying to say across the board that it has to happen, but you see it happen a lot. And I think it's a complex situation, but there is this sense that we put people on a pedestal, we make them larger than life. A recent show I talked about how every human is just a human, and this is another part of that paradigm or thinking, that we see people and we think they're larger than life, that they have every answer for us, and now I don't have to think anymore. Now I can know with certainty that I'm following the right path, but it just doesn't exist. And when we do that, we let people become more than human, better than human, and they start to treat people as less than human and get away with it, which is not okay. Kind of deviated from the beginning of it, but just some thoughts on how we treat other people, or how we treat people that tell us they have all the answers, that should actually make us skeptical, rather than we should give into the calm that certainty might give us or try to fool us with. All right, let's go to our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Back. Started the show talking about Iran, and then getting into certainty and wanting to have certainty about even the news and what's going to happen to the future of Iran. And then in general, in the last segment, certainty and looking for ways to get away from the uncertainty that comes from just human existence and the realities of life, which are uncertain, from what to do now to what's going to happen to how things will play out to our future, all those things. Even very small but related is going to psychics. Why do people want to go to the psychic that down the street, or tarot cards, or all these things that people might turn to for someone who knows the future? Because the uncertainty is so hard for us to deal with. Even if someone's just telling us what's going to happen, the anxiety of waiting for it, that anticipation, can be so uncomfortable. They'd rather know than to just see what happens and let life happen when it does, even though no one has that type of window to the future. And I was talking about in the end of the last segment. I wasn't expecting to go into things like the Epstein files and people in the healing world. And it's interesting how often healers are actually, when they become big and famous, they hurt so many people. So it's such a paradox, but I think it shows that the intentions were never right or aligned with actually helping or being of service. And if we connect that back to Iran, the thing that comes to my mind is, not that this is exactly what happened in Iran in the revolution, but in general, because life is uncertain, the world is uncertain, we do look to leaders to guide us, to give us some sense of calm, to give us some sense that they are certain that they can make sure everything is okay. And when I talk about these things, it doesn't make it black or white that either, people have certainty and we can follow them, or no one knows anything. Because I think that's sometimes how it could sound, but that's not at all what I mean. So of course, I don't think everyone is as good or as ready or has the right character to be a leader as everyone else. That's definitely not what I think. But I don't think there's any perfect heroes out there, the ways we want them to be. We want that charismatic leader who we can follow and know that because we follow them and they lead us, we can't go the wrong way. Everything is going to be okay. And so we see this happening throughout history where leaders come forward, so someone like this kind of healing world, which is definitely there, but in every type of part of life we see this, but especially in the political realm, we see people that come forward and that say that they have the perfect ideas and knowledge, experience, character, everything to guide us, guide the country, the nation, whatever it is that they want to lead to the promised land and to a utopia or to success or whatever is their way of presenting it. Basically, they are this invincible leader that will take us wherever we want to go. If times are uncertain, if there's war, whatever it might be, or just life is uncertain itself, which it is, they have the answers. And so, as I've been saying, we are suckers for this because that uncertainty doesn't feel good. And so when someone steps up and says they know, and if they have the right charisma and they could, have some ideas that make us feel a certain way or some rhetoric that makes us feel a certain way, we might think we found it. This is the person. And because of that, we can then put that person on a pedestal. They become larger than life, more than human. And we want to, in fact, we have to give them all the power we can, because if this person has all the answers, if this person can take us and guide us to the promised land, we have to give them all the power they might want or need. And often these people ask for a lot of power. You see this with dictators. Very often what a dictator will do is they'll talk about how uncertain things are, unsafe things are. And because of that, I need more power to, make everyone safe. I don't want the power, they might even say, maybe they won't, but sometimes they might even present it that way. It's just a necessity of the time that I have to take on more power, and then soon I'll give it back. Even I think that's what Hitler did, that he, there was some fire that it was unclear exactly who caused it or what happened, but it was a really horrific thing, and it made things look unstable and unsafe. And so he, said, I'll have some more powers for just a short period of time, but that never ended until essentially his life ended. It just continued. So there's often this sense of presenting how scary the world is, uncertain the world is without me, especially. But here I am, the savior that will protect all of us from these dangers. But you'll have to give me even more power to do so, because, if we kind of have these checks and balances and those, pesky things like a real democracy, it might get in the way of me taking care of you, just close your eyes, almost like treating us like children. And I'm going to be the mommy or daddy that's going to make sure everything is okay. And people are comforted by this. And then so because of that, we'll give them power and too much power. And because of that, we'll even let them abuse that power in whatever way. It won't be described as abuse when they do it. It'll just be, again, what's necessary to protect and save us. They are larger than human and bigger than any of us. So if they use and abuse people, it's okay. None of it matters. Or you're even lucky to be used by them. It's not even being used because of how great they are and how much above and how superior they are. And so, unfortunately, when we go away from our uncertainty, or one of the ways we go away from it is to try to find a perfect leader who we can put our 100% faith in because they're definitely, this perfect, superior person. We then open the door for them to abuse that power and abuse people, and somehow it's all okay. So it's understandable that we want our leaders to be perfect because that could make us feel comforted by the fact that if we let them lead us, nothing bad can happen. So that desire is understandable, but we have to again recognize that there is no superhuman. There is no person who is infallible and 100% right about everything and can take us to the promised land no matter what. That just doesn't exist. So we choose our best leaders, or we pick the best people to be the leaders in whatever capacities that might be, not because they're perfect, because that's the best that we have. Just like if you're going on a plane, you know that the pilots are not perfect human beings who can't make a mistake. They're human beings, but they're the best people for the job. And even that's why we have a few of them in there, because they can make mistakes and they can hopefully help each other out and make sure they don't make those mistakes become costly and get us home safely. Now we could lie to ourselves and say, oh no, these are two perfect beings that can never make a mistake, so I'm safe. That would be more comforting. The reality is they're not perfect, but they're still very likely, very, very, very likely to get us home safe. And that's all we can have, and that's good enough. Same thing with our leaders. We choose, like a pilot in the sense of guiding us that we think is the best, not because they're perfect, but because they're the best, and that's all we can do. And that can be good enough. And that's also why we do best when we don't have just one person with all the power, because first and foremost, they can make mistakes, obviously, if they're the only one that makes the decisions or has all that power. Two, power is always abused. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. They will always abuse that power if we give someone too much. And so because of that, when we have multiple people, there is many people with power and many people in charge in a democracy where the people get to elect the leaders or the people who are in whatever type of power, position of power. It's less likely for things to go bad. Again, it's not perfect. Democracies are definitely not perfect, but I don't know if it's at the Churchill or some quote of like it's the worst best or the best worst type of system we have, basically. So it's not good, but it's the best one we have, basically. That's much better. So we have to be careful that although when life really feels uncertain, it always is, but we might feel it even more, we are more drawn to leaders or groups who will guide us or would tell us that they will guide us to the promised land with absolute certainty. And I think actually, a theocracy, a religious government, can do this in a double way. It's like we're following God and we're following this right path of God. So if you let us guide you using what you know is the truth, then of course, how could things go wrong? And this could create almost like a chokehold of, if you go against us, you're not just going against us, you're going against God and everything that we know is good. And it can make that power even harder to shake or to get rid of. And that's, what we have in Iran is a theocracy, but it's not about religion. They use religion to do whatever they want, and to abuse their own people, and also to stand behind the sense that we can't be wrong because we are with God, or we are God essentially. So whatever we do is okay. But again, to me, it's a reminder that no one is more than just a human. We're all human beings, and it would be nice to have people in these superhumans that we can then turn to and feel safe. Even I think some of the superhuman appeal for people when we talk about superhuman, comic books, movies, all these kinds of things, is that we wish we did have these heroes, these larger than life, more than human individuals that could protect us and save us from the bad guys and from bad things happening. And so there's such a desire for that. And when you're a baby and a child, your parents do feel superhuman. They feel so strong and so powerful. And we need some of that to feel secure in a world that, especially when you're a child, feels even scarier than it will when you're an adult. We need that feeling. I've always thought it's interesting that sometimes a child will feel like there's a monster under their bed, or they're worried about a monster in the dark, and they run to their parents' room, and then they feel safe, in their parents' bed. But sometimes the monster they're imagining is much bigger than their parents. But still, because of this, it's almost like this delusion of the parents being so powerful and strong. There's a sense that now I'm safe, and really it's that emotional safety and security what we get when we're close to our attachment figures that they're feeling. But it's this interesting sense. It's almost like a exaggerated sense of who they are. That's why you'll see kids fighting, arguing over whose dad is stronger, or whose, mom is more this or that, because there's a sense that my mom or dad is just like the greatest in the world. And we kind of need that comfort to get through even the scariness of being a child in a big world. But we should recognize that as when we become adults, we should no longer need that illusion or delusion that there's a superhuman out there that's going to protect us, and if we let them take care of us and make all decisions and do all that, we're going to be okay. It just doesn't exist. We have people that are the best at it, or the good enough, but there's no perfect leaders out there, perfect people, or superhumans out there. It's all humans, and because of that, no one should have too much power or much more power than anyone else. They might have some decision-making power in a certain area, or they might have authority that they should be using to serve other people or serve the position they are in. But power shouldn't be given to then be used or abused in whatever way someone wants, because they're better than us. At the end of the day, we are all human. And my hope is that for someday very soon, Iran to be led by the people who are just going to be humans, but the best ones to lead Iran into a better and brighter future, and the end of this regime will come. All right, that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Big thank you to Farid in the studio. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee, Free Iran.